Thank you very much for doing this. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Trevor. So excited to be here.
For the listener, you are the CEO of Build Canada, but maybe as a refresher, what is Build Canada?
Yeah, so Build Canada is a nonpartisan, mission-driven movement with the goal of making Canada the most prosperous country in the world. So we started in January of this year, and we're focused on three main areas of work to move towards our goal. Number one, we publish policy memos that are sponsored by leading entrepreneurs and policy thinkers from across Canada. These are big, bold ideas that are designed to shift the Overton window of what is considered to be acceptable in the policy space and just get good ideas out into the public realm. We publish those on buildcanada.com and have been doing that since February. The second thing that we do is we build digital projects that have a civic action bent to them, and we engage volunteers in creating these projects and building them out, and then we publish them online. So this includes everything from sort of budget spending trackers to help Canadians better understand government finances and spending, to outcomes trackers that use AI to automatically track the performance and progress that our federal government is making towards their commitments, and a wide range of other projects. And then the third thing we do is bring people together in person. So we're organizing a constituency for growth across Canada. People don't always want to just do that online. So we bring people together in real life for meetups, events, barbecues, reading groups, you name it. And we're doing that in cities across Canada and soon to launch campus groups in campuses across Canada.
Originally, you began your career in tech. How did you get into tech and why?
Yeah, so my career has spanned sort of policy, politics, and tech for a number of years now. Um, Primarily driven by a mission to just get involved in big ideas and big things. So I spent a lot of time in the climate and sustainability space in the 2000s when that was sort of a very, very topical area to be in. Spent lots of time overseas working for the United Nations, private foundations, and then kind of wound my way to politics actually in 2016. So joined the Trudeau government in 2016. I was director of operations for our environment and climate change minister for 3 years, and then was chief of staff to another minister of finance for a couple of years. And then in 2021, had, three small kids, had gone through a divorce, and was looking for something different. And to be honest with you and to be honest with your listeners, also just felt disconnected from the way and direction our government was taking on a whole host of different files, and just wasn't feeling like it was something that I wanted to be spending my time working on day in and day out. So wanted to kind of take a step back and reflect. And I've always been a very entrepreneurial person and was looking for an environment that was similarly paced to politics. I love the fast pace. I loved the ability to really shape and influence what we were working on and to move big things forward. And so was drawn to sort of the San Francisco startup culture and had got connected to a company called Patch through my climate network. They're an amazing company based in San Francisco that are building carbon market software that connects the supply and demand in the voluntary carbon market space. I joined early on when they had just raised their Series A. We were about 10 people. I joined their leadership team and helped scale that company. They're now Series B. They've raised over 100 million Canadian dollars. And are now around 70 or 80 people globally. So super successful company, still on that upward trajectory. And so that's how I got into the tech space, was just following my climate passion and wanting to work on big things, but tackling it from a different perspective.
Originally, you went to school at the University of Toronto, I think, and then you were a Fulbright scholar at Columbia University as well. So you've had a lot of education too, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, and there was a 4 year. I wasn't one of these people who did my undergrad and then master's right away. I actually had no idea what I wanted to do for my master's degree. I graduated from my undergrad uh, sort of with lots of ideas about what I wanted to do in the future, but wanting some real world experience first. So Uh, Actually worked for the Ontario Public Service for a year after finishing my undergraduate degree, but felt like that really wasn't a great fit for my sort of fast-paced entrepreneurial perspective, and left that. Was going to go to law school, in fact, but decided to take a year off and travel all throughout Southeast Asia. And when I was on that trip, met some really incredible people working for the United Nations, doing multilateral work, and thought that that was a really energizing place to be and to spend time with. So ended up kind of taking a bit of a detour and spent 4 years living in Bangkok, working for the UN. It was an incredible experience, and that kind of like put me on this other trajectory to go to Columbia, where I did my master's in public administration and international affairs.
Originally, are you from Toronto or is it Ottawa?
No, I'm an immigrant to Canada. So I'm originally from the UK. My family emigrated to Canada when I was 10. We relocated to just outside of Toronto to Oakville. So I grew up, did my high school years in Oakville.
And that kind of brings us to the year 2025, which you are now involved with Build Canada. Maybe to set the tone, why do you feel that Build Canada is at an inflection point and was required nowadays? What do you think is different?
Yeah, so I got involved with Build Canada primarily because I felt that we were, not headed in the right direction as a country. I think I shared with you my thinking back in 2021 that you could sort of see the signs already that we weren't on the right track. Um, and by the fall of 2024, like that just uh, really coalesced for me that something needed to be done. And, as we all do, I'm sure you do this as well. You talk to your friends, you're talking in your chat groups, and you're thinking, like, what can I do to help solve this problem? And my answer to that in late 2024 actually was to found Canada Spends, which is now a project of Build Canada, but is a spending tool that helps translate the state of Canada's finances and budget in a way that's just easy to visualize and understand for Canadians. That was my contribution. I started with that. I thought, given what I know about government finances, I thought I was best placed to help build that out. I did that, and then I got connected very early on with Daniel Dubois, who was thinking about the Build Canada concept at that time, along with a number of different entrepreneurs and other founders. And we just joined forces and decided, we're going to build this out. We had a couple of other great people join us as volunteers at that time as well. And then we just started kind of plugging away January and February, building out that concept.
So while you were at Patch, you started to get the idea that the Canadian government was headed in the wrong direction, and you felt that maybe you could help out.
Yeah, exactly. And it's really this founder mindset and builder mindset when you see things that are not going well, whether it's on, the policy front or the economic front, it is sort of a default reaction for people like myself to say, what can I do about it? So Build Canada really was born out of that. And what we spent a lot of time doing, if you think about Build Canada 1.0, we've evolved since then, but Build Canada, the first version of it in January, February this year, was really focused on putting out these big, bold policy ideas in the public realm, sponsored by Canada's top entrepreneurs and thinkers, and really trying to introduce those ideas into the national conversation that was happening in the lead up to our federal election. And so that was kind of the first iteration of Build Canada and what we were really focused on for those first few months.
The first project you got involved in with was the spending tracker. Why did you feel it was important to start tracking the Canadian federal government spending, and why is that important to measure?
Yeah. Well, we're not in a great fiscal situation as a country right now. You will have seen the Parliamentary Budget Office's latest projections that came out last week. The project by 2030, we are going to be spending almost as much on interest payments for our federal debt as we will be spending on the Canada Health and Social Transfers combined. So that's $82 million a year on public debt charges versus about $87 billion a year. Sorry, $82 billion a year on public debt charges versus $87 billion a year on those two programs. That's crazy. That's a lot of money. That is not a good spot for us to be in as a nation. And I think, when I speak to people who don't spend their days pouring through budget documents, they actually just don't have a good sense of how Canada as a nation is spending taxpayer dollars. And so the idea for Canada Spends really came from trying to bridge that gap between what do Canadians sort of understand and know about the budget versus what the government of Canada is actually doing and how they're actually spending money, and trying to bridge that gap using smart visualizations. We have an interactive Sankey chart on that website where people can kind of go and see, what are the different categories of revenue for the government of Canada, how are they spending money, and sort of drill down and better understand those themselves. And so it was really born from like, how do I use my knowledge to bridge this gap and just make it easier for Canadians to understand where money is going so that they can hopefully be more informed and then engage in the way that they feel comfortable engaging on that conversation, whether it's with their member of parliament, whether it's with community groups, or with, other members in their networks to talk about the issues.
It's one thing to communicate the fiscal situation in the country, but sometimes people don't really understand what that means in layman's terms. Have you been thinking about ways to show people what a bankrupt country looks like to make it stark? How do you think about that to really bring the message home?
Yeah, it's a great question. We're talking about a lot of different ideas right now at Build Canada about how we can leverage the Canada Spends platform, um, especially in the few weeks that we have leading up to the next federal budget. I don't know that I have all of the answers of exactly, how to communicate that. If I knew that, I think we'd be doing it already. But I think there's lots of different ways that you can reach people where they're at, whether it's through, simple infographics, whether it's through just like continuing to do interviews and write op-eds, and try and create different charts. I think, in true startup fashion, although Build Canada is a nonprofit organization, we operate very much as a startup. We experiment and we try lots of different things. Some things work really well and they get a lot of traction, and then other things, you try and you fail and you move on, and that's okay. But yeah, would actually, for any of your listeners who have ideas on what it is that they're looking for, and what they'd like to see, we're definitely we're open and would love to try new things to communicate better.
Nobody likes a downer message, but even from my own experiences, you don't really realize the implications of debt loads. Maybe they could be communicated in long wait times for healthcare or potholes in the roads or lots of other opportunities that aren't available for Canadians due to fiscal irresponsibility.
Yeah, exactly. And I think this is it, is that I think the scrutiny that Canadians have, I feel that there's a higher level of scrutiny right now on the fiscal situation for our country than there has been in years past. Part of that, I think, is because the fiscal situation is not great, and Canadians sort of understand that even if they're not chartered accountants or economists, they sort of understand that at a meta level. But I think there's also additional scrutiny because Canadians also are feeling the very real impact in their lives of not having good services. So I live in Ontario. I know we live in different provinces in this country, but in Ontario, many Ontarians do not have a family doctor. This is obviously not a federal issue, but the
Mhm.
provincial government gets money from the federal government to run their healthcare system in this province. Canadians can't find a family doctor. In Ontario, also, many Canadians are finding that the quality of education in the public school system has decreased over the last 5, 10, 15 years. And so they're sort of sitting, and and then there's municipal issues like you mentioned, like potholes, and like taking a long time to get a building permit for a new house, or a construction permit or renovation permit. And so it just feels like at multiple levels of the system, things are not working, and yet Canadians are still paying high taxes. And so I think you also are getting the scrutiny because something is just not adding up in the minds of regular, everyday Canadians who are going about their business, trying to live their life, trying to raise their family, and paying tax into the system that they just are not seeing the results of. And I think that questioning is resulting in, kind of this more national conversation that we're having around where is the money going? How are we spending it? And can we spend it more efficiently to deliver services better?
Do you think there's opportunity to communicate that message in kind of day-to-day images and words that really make sense to the average Canadian instead of macro numbers and deficit numbers?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a Build Canada thing, but also I think other organizations and folks can step up on this too. It's we don't hold a monopoly on communicating this to Canadians, but I think the more that those messages can be communicated in a way that people can relate to in their everyday lives, you'll find it will resonate more. As you said, if you stay at a macro level, like that's great if you're an economist or if you think about things in that way. For your average everyday person who's just trying to live their life, that's not going to be meaningful to them and that's not going to resonate with them. So I think we do need to find ways. We're looking at different methods of storytelling at Build Canada, and thinking through, what we can create and put out there that might help communicate those messages. I think the trick is that, we are in such a still such a divided, like hyper partisan moment, I think, in our culture. And I think the trick to helping communicate that is to try and um, not be boring with the message, and you want it to resonate, but try not to be divisive and negative with the messaging. I think Canadians, like certainly what I've learned through my work with Build Canada in the last 9, 10 months, has been that people resonate with, and they love the optimistic messaging that we're putting out. I think one of the reasons Build Canada has been so successful and has got so much traction over the last number of months is because we have put forward this optimistic message that Canada can be better. We can be ambitious and we can do great things when we work together. And I think if you break that down further to talking to Canadians about the current fiscal situation and how government budgets affect their daily lives and how government spending affects their daily lives, I think if you can frame that in an optimistic, hopeful way, and avoid sort of these like divisive, negative, more partisan framings, I think that will resonate with more Canadians and you'll get a more successful outcome and more traction with that messaging. People are very turned off by partisan messaging and negative messaging, in my experience. And many of the volunteers and people who are involved with Build Canada tell me that they like what we're doing and they want to be part of what we're doing because we are positive and optimistic and nonpartisan.
Yeah, the people across Canada probably all have the same interest in common. They would like schools for their kids and new roads and good health care and short wait times, maybe to get your new passport. And
Yeah.
hopefully that message resonates.
Yeah. I mean, these are kitchen table issues, right? It's like, what do you think about when you're sitting down with your partner, your family, your loved ones? What are you talking about at the kitchen table? You're not talking about, well, I might be talking about macroeconomic issues, but my kitchen table might be different than most people. But most people are just talking about, how to pay their bills and how much their mortgage is and how long it's going to take them to get the passport that they need to go on, their trip next summer. So like I think you need to frame communications and frame issues in that way that you might talk about around a kitchen table with your family.
Yeah. I had to wait almost, for example, I had to wait almost 2 hours to get my passport renewed about a month ago, which seems too long for a routine that most Canadians have to go through at some point.
Yeah, I mean, 2 hours is too long. And there's many things that are just taking too long right now in our system. There was a stat that I saw yesterday. Canada has this thing called a startup visa. A startup visa is a visa that entrepreneurs and innovators from outside of Canada can apply for to use to come here and start a business in Canada that would create jobs and promote growth. The wait time for that visa right now, the processing time, and the fast track processing time is 53 months.
Yeah.
That's an entire business cycle. And this is a program that is designed specifically to attract businesses and entrepreneurs to Canada. And so, whether it's 2 hours for a passport renewal, which I agree is a long time, or 53 months for a entrepreneur to come to Canada to start and grow a business. I mean, we've got to do better as a country if we are going to succeed.
And on the flip side, the idea is to start building things, one of which is Canada's resources, which we've been called resource rich, but productivity poor through the years. How do you think we change that narrative in Canada to start with one example in the business sector?
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of it comes down to regulatory burden and slowness and what I would call friction. We see this in the resource sector um, specifically, but we see it in our economy more generally as well. Um, we need to get better at building things. And in our, you see in our regulatory system and in our culture, we have this default to no for a lot of processes and a lot of, big decisions and small decisions. And I think what we need to do is get to default yes. So how do we get to default yes? We are a resource-rich nation. How do we, as a country, shift our policies and our processes so that the default can be yes to many of these projects and get them built faster? It's a very politicized conversation in the resource space, especially right now. But when you look at our country, like any country, you got to look at your assets, right? And in Canada, whether you like it or not, natural resources is one of our incredible assets, whether it's oil and gas, whether it's our forestry sector, whether it's our critical mineral deposits. These are some of the world's most valuable natural resources, and we have a plethora of them in our country. And I speak as somebody who has spent much of my career in sustainability and environment. And so, I mean, I would be the first one to say we need to obviously do this responsibly, but these are the assets and the building blocks of our economy. And to ignore that sector entirely, I think is a big mistake, and we need to find ways to move faster. Now, in Canada, it is complicated. There are rights holders in many of these locations that we need to consult with. They have duty to consult in this country. There is sort of heavy built-in process already.
So,
But I think we can do much better than what we're currently doing. And I think we need, if everyone kind of came to the table with that mentality of, okay, how do we do that? We're going to do this. How do we do this in the best way possible and the fastest way possible? And how do we default to yes along this entire regulatory process? I think, we would wind up in a better spot.
some people have framed it as kind of a zero-sum game where it's resource development versus the environment. But do you think it's can be reframed as 1 + 1 = 2, where you can take care of the environment, there's regulatory process, stakeholder engagements, but you can also build the economy?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think you can do both. I think, at the end of the day, you're also just going to have to make a decision sometimes on what you're going to prioritize. Does a mine is not does not have a neutral impact on the environment, but I think there are, processes that you can put in place. Um, there are ways that you can develop that particular project that would minimize the impact. So no project is going to have zero impact, but I think as a nation and as a country, we need to decide where are we going to make those trade-offs to get the economic benefit, while also respecting, some of the guardrails and boundaries that we have.
Overregulation has been one reason that capital has slowed flowing into Canada, whether it's in energy or resources or even tech. So, how do you think you can help more investment come into Canada in every sector?
Yeah, it's a really important question. I mean, not only has capital slowed, but if you look at the numbers since January of 2025, we've had $130 billion of capital leave the country. So it's an outflow problem as well as an inflow problem. So there's
Mhm.
what I would characterize as a crisis of confidence in our economy and our ability as a country to get projects built and to be a place where people want to continue investing. In terms of actually attracting capital and getting the investment that we need in some of these bigger projects to get them built, or even, medium-sized projects. Not everything is going to be like, on this major projects list. Um, Even medium-sized projects add up, and we want capital to be investing there. I think lowering the friction, defaulting to yes, and finding ways to accelerate approvals is critical. I will say that accelerating approvals on a project by project basis is probably not the right signal to send to investors because it reinforces this idea that there can be a special fast track and a politicized process for certain projects. And I think generally, while that might work for particular projects and a particular investor, the signal that we want to send as a nation is that if you do business here, we have a fair playing field. The rules apply to everyone, but the rules are designed in a way to like help you get this done as quickly as possible. And I think that's the real message that we need to send is that it's a fair playing field. We move quickly. We want your business. And you have the certainty that if you start this process, you are going to end this process within a certain period of time. Now, there's lots of bits and pieces that go into that. And it is complicated, but I think that's actually the message that capital investors want to hear. I don't think they want to hear the message that, your project can be selected to
Yeah,
be part of this additional group of projects or special group of projects. And so what you really have to do is lobby to get your project part of that special group. What you want to hear is the rules apply to everyone. It's all the same. And guess what? We move quickly and we move fast for everyone.
yeah. It's not we don't live in a dictatorship where the elected official gets to pick projects that they would like to see go through. And all that investors want is a clear rule book for their projects. Have you found it useful to think that way?
I find it useful to think that way. Yeah, and certainly the investors I speak to who are considering allocating capital into the country, they want a fair, predictable
Mhm.
rule book. So, certainly we don't live in a dictatorship. But I think that the major projects office, just to call it out specifically, I think is an interesting idea. Uh, but I think it is the way that that is designed, um, creates incentives
Mhm.
for, you know, um, but
Favorites.
political favoritism. And that's not to say that it's a bad process or that there is political favoritism. I don't know. I'm not involved with that office. So I'm looking at this from an observer's perspective, but it certainly creates the opportunity for that to happen.
Mhm.
And so I think, from a capital allocator's perspective and an investment perspective, the more you can do to just lower friction across the board and make the rules clear for everyone and guarantee speed and low friction for everyone, I think that is when you'll actually start to see capital investment coming back to Canada.
So the critic would say, I agree with this message and I want it to work, but I'm not sure how Build Canada gets concrete results. How do you actually help simplify regulation and get firm deadlines from the Canadian government?
Yeah. So we're not a lobby group. So it's actually not, it is not within our mandate to actually go and lobby and get these things changed. Our approach is to share big, bold ideas transparently in public, sponsored by leading entrepreneurs and policy thinkers to create the conditions for conversation, to where there is interest from whether it's the federal government or provincial governments or municipal governments or members of the opposition, where there is interest from elected officials and leaders to engage with the ideas, we'll go and engage, and we'll certainly, make connections where folks want connections to some of the entrepreneurs and practitioners who have real world experience in delivering, whether it's major projects or allocating capital or, whatever the particular theme of their memo is, we can make those connections happen. But it is not within, we're not a think tank, we're not a lobby group, we don't operate that way. And actually, like, our success is not based on any metrics around whether or not specific policies get introduced or approved. So, not to dodge your question, but it's actually just not how we think of ourselves as an organization. We're a movement for change, and our thesis is that if you organize, rather than lobbying on particular individual topics, which is what a lot of think tanks and advocacy groups do. They'll pick a topic or an issue set and they'll go and lobby and spend lots of money trying to move that particular issue set forward. Where we see the gap in Canada is that we actually have never had a pro-growth constituency in Canada that has been organized. We have constituencies organized on a whole host of other issues. There's an environmental constituency that's organized. There are, folks who like really want to talk about social justice issues or, any host of sort of special interest issues. They're very well organized communities. Religious groups are super well organized and talk and advocate about, the issues that they care about. We have never had a nonpartisan pro-growth constituency organized in this country, and that is what Build Canada is trying to do. And the reason we're doing that is because we believe that it is when you have a large enough group of organized people asking for the same thing and pushing for the same thing that you actually start to see those things show up in the platforms of political parties. We don't care whether it's, the blue party, the red party, the orange party, the green party. We don't care which party actually implements any of these ideas. What we want to do and what success would look like for us is if all of these parties have a pro-growth agenda and pro-growth ideas in their platforms, and they actually start reflecting what this large growing constituency of Canadians want. So that's what success looks like for us, is organizing that pro-growth constituency and getting it large enough so that it can start to influence how political parties are thinking about platforms that would reasonably get them elected.
And from the tech sector perspective, ironically, a lot of the leaders in that area of the economy share the same concerns as maybe, say, the energy industry or any other sector in Canada. But what are some of the initiatives that you're working on for the tech sector to help it out in Canada?
Yeah. So Build Canada is not only the tech sector. We have lots of different sectors and entrepreneurs from lots of different sectors involved in Build Canada. I think for the, tech sector specifically, there have been a number of memos that sort of speak maybe a little bit more uniquely to their their set of interests. We've published a memo just a couple weeks ago, actually, from Harley Finkelstein at Shopify, which was talking about the SRED program
Yeah.
and some of the challenges that that program has in terms of the level of bureaucracy and burden on applications. It's not tech sector specific, but it's
Mhm.
really geared towards innovators, many of whom would be in the tech sector. And so that memo was outlining ways to actually just simplify that application process so that companies that are applying for that program don't have to spend, 25 or 30% of the value of the grant just to hire a third-party consultant to unpack the complexity of the memo and help them with the application. That's a very simple thing. It applies to the tech sector, but it also applies to other entrepreneurs and innovators. Um, there's been some incredible memos that we have published from leaders in the AI space talking about making government services AI first and digital first, creating a digital, like a unique digital identity for our healthcare system in Canada so that records could be shared both between provinces and with different doctors and different hospitals, so that as a Canadian, if you had a digital health identity, you could just, be with a doctor in your hometown one day and in a hospital on the other side of the province the next day, and maybe in another province later that week. And if you had a health issue that kept cropping up, all of those healthcare professionals could just access your health records in one place and move away from, what is a very antiquated system in many provinces where healthcare professionals are still sending each other faxes to communicate health data. So there's a few like that. I mean, tech sector, I think, is a bit of a misnomer in that people have an idea of what they mean when they say tech sector, but when you actually look at what is happening in the entrepreneurial and innovation space in Canada, a lot of it is happening, a lot of that innovation and entrepreneurial activity is happening across sectors, but they're all really technological and digital solutions in many of these different sectors, whether that's, health or mining or natural resources, education. A lot of it is technology. When I say tech sector, I actually say that the tech sector is sort of everything these days because
Mhm.
any modern company is using technology to be more efficient and to deliver better customer service and to deliver a better product.
It seems like there are commonalities in all forms of business across country, whether it's tech or energy or entrepreneurs everywhere that can unite, build Canada, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's a huge amount of ambition. People want Canada to be the best it can be, and they have that ambition for Canada as a country. They want us to grow, they want us to be successful. They see that we have all of the ingredients that we need to be the most prosperous country in the world. And it's really just about putting those together in the right recipe to build the future we want and to get to that level of prosperity that they all know that we can get to.
And one of the programs you're doing is meetups and programs like that to help unite entrepreneurs across the country. Unfortunately, the last 10 years have been a little divisive from a Western Canadian perspective. Do you think programs like that can help unite the messaging on business throughout the country when there are certain areas of the country that are not happy?
Absolutely. I mean, I think we have more that unites us than divides us in this country. I think it has been, there has been a very divisive narrative, as you say, but when you get together with Canadians in person, you very quickly realize you have so much in common and there's so much to pull for. It is in the last 3 weeks, we have had events in Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton, Toronto, Ottawa. I'm doing an event next week in Montreal. All of these events have been massively oversubscribed. So
Mm.
we had over 250 people register for our event in Vancouver. We had about, 150, 160 show up. Same with our event in Ottawa. Same with Calgary, Edmonton. It's just the amount of energy is just incredible. And I have been to most of these events, not all, and I make a point of going around the room and always asking people, why are you here? What do you know about Build Canada? What makes you optimistic about the future? And it is, you know, almost to a person, all of these people are highly talented people. They have lots of opportunities in life. They are high agency. They are doers. They want to be part of the solution, and they have other options. They could go to the US. They could be doing other things. But they've chosen to come to a Build Canada event. They've chosen to stay in Canada and build here. And I think they really care about Canada as a nation. They're very patriotic and they want to see Canada do things collectively together. They don't want to just see British Columbia succeed or Alberta succeed or Quebec succeed. They have bought into the idea of Canada as a nation together moving forward. And I think, particularly in the current geopolitical context, there's nothing that will unite people more than kind of like common threats
Mhm.
beyond our borders. And I think, it's actually an amazing time for Canada and a great opportunity to really look within our borders and unite together and see, really recognize and appreciate what we have here. And I think just double down on this incredible opportunity we have as a nation to build together. So I see those meetups and those in-person events as, it's like when you're on X and people are sometimes saying nasty things to each other. It's really easy to like be unkind, to be unfair,
Mhm.
and to say things online and in a digital space that you may not say to someone in person. And what the Build Canada in real life events, these meetups and barbecues, reading groups that we're having, they give people the opportunity just to connect on a personal level as people. And so I have there's a lot of optimism that I have around that. I think it's a great format. There's certainly a high demand for it and an appetite, and we're going to keep doing those. I'm really actually excited to see how our campus club events do. I suspect they're going to be equally popular. I think there's a huge uh, appetite in the student population. I've had 18-year-olds, I've had 16, 17, 18-year-olds email me, people who are students who are in high school, just graduated high school, just starting university, reach out and email me and say, I love what Build Canada is doing. I want to be involved. How do I get involved? And so I think we'll start to see that in campuses that, young people have the most to lose from Canada not succeeding. This is a country that, they're in. Maybe, maybe they don't have dual citizenship. Maybe they don't have the opportunity to go elsewhere. This is where they are, and they have a vested interest for their future in making sure that we have a prosperous economy, we have a productive economy, that we have housing that is affordable, that there are jobs, that our education system is working, that the tax dollars that they are paying is making, funding a family doctor for them. So they are, I find actually there's so much energy in that cohort of 18 to 30-year-olds who just they've got their whole future ahead of them. And I think they are seized with the moment and seized with the idea of being part of a high ambition, action focused, mission driven movement. And I think we will continue to see that grow in cities and on campus.
An outside threat is one way to unite the country, but as we mentioned, the last handful of years, the West has been from their perspective, trying to contribute to Canada, but has yet felt their message has fallen on deaf ears, recognizing the reality of the Western economy is resource-based. How do you, although the tech is growing, how do you make sure that there are, I guess, relationships built across the country and into the West, and it's not just Ottawa based?
For Build Canada specifically, are you talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we are setting up our city nodes. So we have staff in Toronto, Edmonton, and Montreal. So we're across the country. I'm based in Ottawa. I'm the only one here. And our volunteer base is across the country as well. So we've got a fairly significant volunteer base in the West, as well as Ontario and Quebec. Um, and the way that we think about growing out our movement and engaging those volunteers is really on a nodal basis. So you have to do things locally and engage people locally. So that's what we're focused on right now is building out our city chapters, campus clubs, opportunities for people to connect locally with their community. And I think we need to find ways, we collaborate online, we're building digital projects, which is a way for people to interact together across the nation. But I think we also need to find ways for people to come together in person from across Canada. And so we'll be looking at ways that we could potentially do that in the spring, maybe in a bigger summit kind of format or conference sort of format. I would love to bring people together more in person. And find ways to do that. But it's a real challenge. Like you said, we're a big country. We're coast to coast to coast. There's a lot of
Mhm.
area there, and I think we do need to find ways to increase the cross-pollination of ideas and understanding and perspectives from the different regions of our country and what is important and what matters in Alberta or to a family in Alberta or to a young professional or to a student in Alberta may be different than British Columbia or Ontario or Quebec. And I think we need to unpack that and find ways for people to connect. But I think what people will find when they get together in person is that there's more that unites us than divides us. But I mean, you're based in Alberta. I would love to hear from you. What are some things like when you think about, you know, some of the alienation that has happened and the divisiveness that has happened in the last 10 years? Like, I would love to hear your perspective on what are ways that an organization like Build Canada can approach that and think about that.
I guess it's representation. Listening, someone that listens, may be a good way to sum it up from the perspective of someone in the West. And uh, there are things that unite everybody. So organizations that listen, maybe to opinions from the West, is one thing that seems to come up over and over again.
Yeah.
So, among other things, this not to get too political, but that would be one example I can think of.
Yeah, well, keep your eyes peeled on what we're doing because I would love your feedback and your perspective as we keep building out what we're doing.
And what final message to Canadians would you give to them if they might be feeling stuck or pessimistic about things right now? What would you tell them?
You can just do things. You don't need to wait for permission. You can just do things. So if you're feeling stuck, you're feeling unmotivated, uh, you have the power to take it within your own hands, organize with your community, organize with your neighbors, uh, you think about what you want to do and just go build it and go do things. If you're looking for ideas, join Build Canada. You can go to buildcanada.com, join us there. We definitely welcome more people into the movement, get you into our chat and our channels, get you into some projects. But if you have your own ideas in your community and things you want to do, just you don't need to wait for permission. You don't need for government to tell you you can do things. You can just go do them. So I'd encourage you to do that.
And any listeners, if they want to get involved with Build Canada, can go to the website. And I think you've got events planned across the country for the next year or so.
Yeah, that's right. So go to www.buildcanada.com, join the movement. You'll get a link to our Discord where you can join and you can check out what is going on in different cities across the country. Also follow us on X or LinkedIn, and we post regular updates there. But yeah, we'd love to have more people join. Really excited for the momentum that we have going, and yeah, excited to see where we'll be in a year from now.
I really appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thank you, Trevor.